Okay, so I'm Cynthia Becker, and I'm the host of the reality series CPS the Horror Stories. I'm not an attorney or a social worker. I'm a mom who lost her kids to CPS, and after fighting for a few years, I did get them back. Um, I believe that CPS was maybe one day about protecting children, and now it's less about protecting children and all about money. So, Shannon, can you introduce yourself?
I am Shannon. I am a mother of 5 children. I lost two to the state of Colorado. Um, and I am diligently working now to see what can be done in regards to that situation. I was a victim of the system as a child. Um, and as I transitioned into adulthood, it made the situation, my life situation, much more difficult. I wasn't in the care of the state, I was more of their forgotten property.
Where are you from?
Colorado,
And are you still there now?
no,
Where are you?
I'm in Texas.
Okay. Um, so were you in the foster system as a child?
Yes, I was.
Can we start there?
Sure. Um, from a young age, I was a victim of abuse in my home. Um, my mother, really honestly, she only knew abuse as a way of caring. And not too much fault of her own. She defaulted to that behavior. And I was removed from her home several times. Um, some sometimes it was my sister who would really be brave enough to say something, um, or it would just be circumstantial events where I would end up in and out of care. I learned the racial slur, the N word. Not going to say it. But I learned it in foster care. I was told that uh, they sleep outside, and I was told that I was one at that moment. And so in Colorado winter, I slept on the porch of a lady whose face still kind of haunts me a little bit. And because at first she seemed so nice, she seemed like someone that wouldn't hurt me or anything. And once the social worker left, doors were closed. She was like, "Yeah, you can go ahead and take those clothes off because inward sleep outside." And I was still unaware of what that word meant or how it pertained to me. Um, and I realized that maybe life is better at home. Um, I would tell the social worker things like that one. And she would say, it's not okay to, use your imagination against people. Um, that sentence really blew my mind. And so it just progressed from there. I was in a home with an elder man and woman. And this man would come in my room while I was sleeping and masturbate over my face. Um, it was at that moment that I realized that the majority of a broomstick could go up my rectum without bleeding. Um, I was consistently molested in that home. And when I told them, they would say, "Oh, she's stealing food," and they would put food underneath my mattress and things like that so they could show the social worker what I've been doing. Um, at that time, I was not aware that I had narcolepsy, and so really most of my childhood I spent asleep. And so without any explanation of what I was doing or where I was, they believed what they were saying. They were like, "Well, if you weren't doing your schoolwork, it was either school or sleeping for me." And she was like, "Well, what were you doing?" I was like, "Asleep." And she was like, "Well, that's not medically possible." And I'm thinking, well, okay. So they started to believe things regarding me. They would say, oh, I'm this violent, outrageous person. I would make these imaginary claims. I remember a foster home where she had three other little girls, and I was the older one of those three. Um, and she would try to make me force feed them on the floor by sitting on them and shoving food into their mouth. Because she said that the social worker said they were getting a bit skinny. And that I should help her so that we don't go to a worse home. Um, I I did end up losing my mother when I was 16. And after a series, one foster home was amazing. These people were incredible, and I stayed for only 2 days. But after a series of just horrible things, I was eating sand for a while because I was not a human enough to eat food in one of the foster homes I was in. I lost my mother at 16. And the last foster home I was in, the first question she asked me was, "What is my drug of choice?" Um, it's not uncommon, I guess, because the home that she had consisted of three other young women. One was severely addicted to heroin, one was an alcoholic, the other was just 12, but she had drinking problems and she was smoking. And I was like, "I don't do drugs." And she was like, "Okay, well, that's a lie, but okay." And she giggled about it and just kind of left me alone for a while about it. Um, and then I noticed that the older girls that were working, she would take their entire checks. She would do whatever she felt like, and in order to shut them up, she would give them their drug of choice. I walked in on one young lady, and she was sitting on the edge of the bed, and she was going off because she was like, "That was my paycheck. I need to make my paycheck." And she was like, "What are you going to spend it on? Because I already have whatever you want right here." And the girl looks at her and just is overjoyed at all of these needles and a tourniquet and this like this stuff on this metal little plate thing. And I still to this day don't know what it is, don't want to know what it is. And she starts picking up the things and she ties this thing around her arm. And when I was like, "Yo, what's going on here? That doesn't look like medicine." And the foster mom slammed the door right in my face. And she come like few minutes later, she comes bolting out of the room, and I'm like already trying to figure out who to call. Like, I don't even know. And I had gone downstairs and I got on the phone with the social worker and I was waiting on hold. But I didn't know any better. I could have called 911. I didn't know. But I had to ask before, like, you have to ask before you can utilize emergency services. Like, you can't call 911 without letting your social worker know. And so I called the social worker.
Why is that?
I have no idea. She was like, when we first got into the home, she was like, if you have an emergency, go to your foster parent, but you're not allowed to use 911 services. I was like, okay. But it wasn't that uncommon because when I was in other foster homes, like when this guy, he would molest me with like rape me with different objects in the house. And I had called the police one time and my social worker went off on me and she was like, "You're not allowed to do that. You have to contact us." And so when the lady had told me that, I just went along with it. You kind of just fall into that. Whether it makes sense or not, you just kind of do what they tell you to do. And so I was on the phone with the social worker and I was sitting on hold for like ever. And she comes flying down the stairs and she snatches the phone from me. And this is back when they're on the like accordion things. It wasn't that long ago, but it was a while ago. And she takes it and she goes like this around my neck with it. And she's like, "You're not allowed to call whoever you feel like." And she hangs the phone up and she puts her hand on it while it's on the wall. And she's like, "You're going to stay here until I tell you to leave." Being that I was a victim of abuse from the age of 6, I learned to comply or it would get worse. So I sat there, and I felt like crap because there was nobody saving the girl upstairs. And finally, like after a couple hours, she comes downstairs and she's like, "You're an idiot. Why are you still standing there?" And so I go and I run upstairs to see what's going on with her, and she is on the floor in the bathroom covered in fecal matter and vomit, and she's just talking about birds and blue monkeys and applesauce, and she keeps thinking her poop is applesauce. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going to be a part of it. And she was like, why don't you just join in? Why don't you just fit in already? And I was like, I'm not going to fit into this. And I go and I clean her up, and the foster mom is fighting me not to clean this girl up. I clean her up. And after a while, I go to school. It's a couple of weeks later, and I go to school, and she comes barging into my school. Now this is a tiny little bitty school, and it's like a charter school, and I am pretty much ahead of every curve in the school. So I'm sitting at the desk with the principal, and we're just hanging out. And she comes busting in there, and she's demanding to go through my locker, saying at the top of her lungs that I have her pornography and her masturbation toy, and that I'm probably taking her porn to school. And everybody in my school knows better, of course, and they're not really believing it. But as a teenage girl in a school, you're going to have idiots that are going to bully you regardless, let alone with this being the narrative. So it comes down to I had went to a bachelor party when I was younger. At this point, I am 17, going on 18, if not 18 already. And no, I'm 17. I was 17. And one of my best friends is getting married, and I don't know anything about bachelor parties, so they had these little suckers that had little caps that are shaped like things. And I found it to be really funny. So I kept like the cap part because it was just like this green glow in the dark little thing that had a sucker in it. And it was like the only memento from that moment that I had, because like 9 days after that bachelor party, my friend got in a wreck and she died. She didn't even get to get married. And so I kept that little thing, and it kind of became this cherished item, regardless of its appropriateness. And the foster mom takes it out of the like little bag. I always had a little bag of little things that matter to me. Because when you go into foster care, you've got a backpack or trash bag or something, and so there's not room for anything precious. And so she went in there and she grabbed just that, and she was like, "Look at you! You're this whore. You're all over town. You're stealing food and you're stealing porn." And I'm like, lady, if she knew the truth, she would know that 90% of the time I really wasn't in her house. I learned very young how to get out of foster homes where the foster parent did not care, or care to pay attention. And I had been gone from her house for like a week, and she didn't even notice. She didn't even say anything. She didn't care. It was nothing. Um, and so eventually, she wanted me out of the house. I wanted out of her house, and I emancipated from foster care. And that's a really brief overview of the nightmares that I've had.
You said you started masturbating?
No.
What was that last thing that you said?
I said that I emancipated.
Emancipated. I was like, what?
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. So you have an incredible story, and I don't mean that in a good way. Like, I mean, you have an amazing testimony. So some questions to reflect. Did you have to sleep outside?
Yes. In several of my foster homes, I slept outside on the porch. That first one that I went to, I was out on the porch every night. It got to where there was
What were the temperatures, and what did you have to sleep?
I had a blue and white trash bag, to the point where I only buy black trash bags at this moment because I don't want to see white trash bags. Um, and I was in my socks. She let me wear my socks a couple of times. Um, but when I came to her home, I only had 3 pairs of shorts and a t-shirt. And so that's all I was out there with a trash bag and my clothes, just whatever I was wearing that day. And we ate outside. She put my food out on the porch one time. I came home from school and dinner, and there was no dishes, was sitting on that back area of the porch where she would have me sleep and do my homework. And she said she doesn't have slave quarters in her house for me.
This makes me so angry. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand.
If you open your heart and you open your home to a child, especially a child that's already been hurt, like my mom, like I said, she didn't know any better. Her default was abuse because her mother did the same. I'd sleep in closets, and not like, luxury closets. Those one bottom shelves of the linen closet areas, I'd be in there for weeks. I'd hike up and down the stairs for hours, be in the corner for days, times where I hadn't eaten in months, beaten to the point where I turned around once and saw my blood covering my mom's shirt. She looked like a butcher. And it was just coming from my own backside, my back, and everything below, with just my blood just covering her clothing. But these are things,
Why?
huh?
Why?
She didn't know any. She didn't know any different. She didn't like. She beat me that day.
With what? What? Who are
Uh,
you bleeding from?
I was bleeding from my back. Like it
But
was these type of cords, the utility type of cord. She would beat me with various objects. Depends on what was near her. The running joke in the house was if the day ends in Y, I was going to get my butt torn up, and it was fact. Um, it was beyond. It was beyond her being capable of regular thought. But when I learned her story, I realized who she was. And to sum up the whole experience of losing her, the day before she died, I was taking one of these little mucus thingies and breaking up the mucus in her back and just whatever she'd asked me to do. I don't even know what it was. And she told my brother and my sister, she was like, well, I think Shannon's a little bit mad, so I'm going to talk to her for a moment. And I didn't think I was mad. I was just zoned out doing what I was told to do. And she's like, wholeheartedly, this monster who tormented me my entire life gave me the most heartfelt apology and said, I wish I was better to you. And I promise from this day on that I'm going to be a real mom to you because you're the seed that I should have been watering instead of other things. And I was like, hey, that's cool. But at 16, I was at the point where it was like, God, it's her or I take my own life. It's fix her or I'm out of here. Because I would pray that I would break all the bones in my body so that I could have a full body cast. So there was nowhere for her to hurt me. Um, and I began to have severe insomnia because sleeping at night was terrifying. There was no way I was going to sleep in that house. There was times where she would come in, start tearing me up over something that happened the night before. And it wasn't just like regular discipline. If your kid is supposed to do their chores before they go to bed, I get it. Wake them up, say, hey, honey, you didn't do your job. Don't want to finish it at maximum, okay? If not, say, hey, in the morning, you got to do blah, blah, and blah. And then you'll be able to do whatever your free time thing is. Whatever.
agreed.
You make an arrangement with your child and you understand that sleep is still necessary, you know? Um, and so she would just come in, swinging different objects. The first moment of abuse with her that I recall, My sister and I snuck cherries out of the refrigerator. My sister was like, go get them and we'll eat them together. And I'm like, cool, I don't know what this is. I never stole before. But that day I asked my mom what stealing is. And she said, when you take things, you're not told that you can have them. So my sister was like, I'm saying you can have them, so go and get them. Well, I'm 6. Like, of course, I'm going to go get some cherries out of the fridge. What is their maraschino, whatever they are, the ones in the little jar. Yeah. And all of a sudden we're woken up. She's got a broom and a mop, and she is railing my sister. And I mean, she is just beyond belief, just tearing her apart. And she might have only swung at her once or twice, but for my 6-year-old self, there was somebody hurting my sister. So I jumped in and I said, Mom, I did it. It was me. It wasn't her. It was me. And at that moment, I made the biggest mistake of my life, because at that moment, I became the one that stood there and took every beating for everyone in my household. There was no pause for her. All of a sudden, I went from 6-year-old me to the one she let out on. And this was so horrendous. I remember waking up the next day with bumps and bruises. I never saw a bruise before, so I thought I was changing colors. There was no explanation for me. There was nothing there. And my whole life went this way. You wake up, you never know what you're going to get beat for. I spent most of my time after that unconscious, and I wasn't aware that I had narcolepsy. I wasn't aware of any of that. I wasn't aware that I was losing consciousness due to anxiety or anything. And so I thought that it was wrong of me to be asleep all day long, because she'd be mad. I'll do my chores, but I'll be asleep in the middle of doing them, and she'll come in, she'll beat me up for it. I would go to the bathroom and fall asleep on the toilet. She would come in, what are you doing? It's so inappropriate, and beat the hell out of me for it, you know? So she apologizes, and she's like, I'm so sorry. I should have never done those things, because that's what I went through when I was younger. And this whole story, and I'm sitting there blank stares. Like, at this point, I'm 16 and I already don't like you. I don't like you for valid reasons. I don't like you. But I am forced to love you, because at the end of the day, I still have a roof over my head and clothing. And you're not able to see how wrong it is. And you don't, there's times she said, you're not even my daughter. I believe her. I do. I firmly believe that you're her child. And so, you know, she's like, I'm so sorry. And then 2 o'clock the next morning, she's not breathing. And my younger brother, who was 14, and my older sister, who has frontal lobe damage and cerebral palsy, they come in and they're freaking out at me, of course, because I'm the only sound killer in the house at the moment. So I remember going into the room, and she had vomit out of her nose, out of her mouth. And my brother kept screaming, it's because I made her bread. And I was like, no, she had no lid over her esophagus. There was nothing at the point. It eroded to the point where it was weakened. There was no seal.
Was she on drugs or alcohol or something?
No, she was taking medications for various depressions and pain medications. She had discovered a couple of weeks prior to that she had been taking ibuprofen. It's something that had caused acidity to build up in her stomach, and it just wore slowly but surely at the lid of her esophagus. And so there was no differential between that and the trachea, and things went in various places. And I remember just like I was doing everything I knew CPR wise. I was trying to get the little baby bulb to suck out her nose. I kept asking my brother for the baster. I was like, you cannot die. You can't promise to be my mother and then die right in front of me the next day. I laid down. We hung out all night long. We watched Mad TV. Like, that was like the thing, you know? And we watched African Queen. It was like one of her favorite movies. And we hung out together. We spent time as a normal unit that night. And so to wake up to that, my brother saying, Mom's not breathing. She's not snoring anymore. You got to come see what's happening. So I'm on the phone with 911. I'm trying to stay calm. I'm trying to describe the things that I see, my mother was in the 300s, maybe two something. She wasn't very big, but for my skinny 16-year-old self, she was a lot to move around. They were like, turn her on her side. She was already on her rescue side. Like I already had her set up, like everything that I knew to do, and I was like, I'm trying to suction out her nose and her mouth. She's not. There's no air coming in from her nose and her mouth, and everything in me. Like I took AP classes, I took infant talented classes. We learned how to do tracheotomies on cadavers. Like we actually did it on dead people. And so of course I'm only 16 though. I'm not allowed to do that physically, but I wanted to. I wanted to save her because I did not want this to be my narrative. I did not want that to be a part of my life. But to surmise the story, she died. And everyone's standing around me and they're crying and they're upset and I'm numb. I'm numb because to me it's not even real. Was it a good moment for me? It meant that a lot of the nightmares ended, but they ended at that apology. So they ended that day regardless. But it was so bad at that point, you know? And if you take a kid into your home that has gone through these things, you cannot say, now you sleep outside. No, I don't have slave quarters for you.
How old were you when you went into foster care the first time?
7.
And that's when they made you sleep outside?
Because my brother had fairer skin than I did, he got to sleep inside.
My son is 7. I cannot imagine telling my baby, or anyone telling my baby, you don't fit in here, whatever reason, go sleep outside. Did you already tell me the temperatures that it was?
Oh, no. So in the winter, we could hit an average of, freezing point or below. I remember one time going to school that day, and the very tips of my fingers were kind of like a bluish, blackish color. And the teacher was saying, well, it's about 10 degrees below zero, so you might want to be inside. And I was like, is that why my fingers are changing? And she looks and she's like, oh my gosh. And she was like, you can't go playing in snow without gloves on. And she does everything she can to warm my hands up. But to the tips of my fingers, I still don't have very much sensation. It's there, I can feel, but it's just pretty numb. I burned my thumb pretty bad right under here, and I didn't even know. I didn't even notice. But those things linger. Yeah, it was cold. It was one time it was about 3-4 feet of snow outside. I made a hole. I dug a hole, put my bag over it, and just slept in the hole of snow. I figured have an adventure while you're out there. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get a drink.
Well, my body, everything about me hurts right now for you. And I don't even know what to say. Like, that's sad. That's wrong. I hope you know that was wrong. And I hope you know not everybody is like that.
Yeah.
A couple things that you've said. My mom, one time, I was supposed to do the dishes every day, but before bed. And my dad had told me it's okay because I was studying. I was junior high, I don't remember, but I was studying. And I'd been having a hard time in school because I was being bullied and blah, 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 blah. So my dad said, it's all right, just go to bed. I said, okay. My mom came home, pulled me out of bed, like screaming at me, then emptied the cabinets and made me wash.
Every single dish. Yeah. My mom would do things just like that. She would destroy the whole living room or bedroom or whatever and make me redo it.
And then, me and my kids spent the weekend at the beach, and it blew me away because my children were playing with a bunch of, can I say black children, African American children? And my heart just melted because I love how my kids don't see color like that. They see it, but that's a kid. I want to play with them.
Right.
That's
It's
a
not
kid. I want
relevant.
to play with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me so my best friend is black.
Mm-hmm.
And he loves me. And there's nothing different between he and I.
Yeah.
And
And
when I hear this stuff, I don't understand how people see anybody different, especially a child.
especially a child. And the thing was, I never had racial anything in my whole life before. My mom had white friends all the time, best people in the world. All my friends basically white. I'm in Colorado. We're everybody, you know. And you're not. They didn't treat me different. They didn't call me a nigga until I never heard that word. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I don't know what I can't say. Um,
No, you're fine.
okay, I did not even know the word nigger until I was in the foster home. And I went to school the next day and I asked my favorite teacher, um, and I was like, what is a nigger? And she was like, who told you that? And I
How
was
old were you?
7.
Okay.
And she was like, who said that to you? And I was like, the lady that I stay with now. And she was like, that's a terrible word. And she explained to me not only its root, not only the word was used against us. And she's like, if anyone in your life is saying those things to you, they do not care about you. And I said, then why do they call it foster care? Because she does not care. And I think that was the start of the end of my stay at the lady's house, because I didn't tell my teacher anything until probably a couple of months. Um,
And did you think she called someone?
I think she did, because
Good.
to be,
Good.
to be absolute, my mom had her nightmarish ways, but she was a big part in our education, and she made sure that no matter what, we were getting the best from everyone else. Um, she was very active in my school activities, so my principals and teachers, they knew her well. And they knew that she had a I'm not playing attitude, so they can only imagine what was going on at home. And I mean, my mom would straighten out a whole classroom of kids with just her presence. I remember her walking down the hallway in this long black leather jacket, and I'm in line, and I'm just like, I'm doing regular kid stuff in a line at school. All of a sudden, all my classmates, quiet. My best friend's like, and she's trying not to,
I
and
have that healthy, I would say I have a healthy presence for children too, where I'm very respected.
mm-hmm. And she had I don't want to drag her completely through the mud. Not saying what she did was even remotely okay, but as a sound person, my mom was very giving. She was very understanding. These kids loved her, but they knew she was serious. And so when I told my teacher that, um, word got to my mom in some fashion. Some things happened, and all of a sudden, I wasn't in her home anymore. Um, and that was the same teacher I was telling my fingertips to before I asked her about the N word, because the lady used it all the time. And I was like, is it a name for me, or what does she keep calling me this for? Um, and I never made the connection until the history was given to me. Um, and so, it gets to you have these little moments of heroes in all of this. But to be called something racial, my kids are mixed. My best friends are a mixture of everything. Um, and I did not feel like my skin mattered until I was in foster care. It made a big difference of how they treated me. My brother, who has lighter skin than me, and my sister, who has lighter skin, oh my gosh, they were treated like almost royalty in comparison. Um, but I thought it was just I'm unlucky. People just don't like me, maybe? I don't know.
No. Um, what may I ask what your teacher said that word meant? Because I've never actually heard or really understood it either. I just know you don't say it because it's demeaning.
It is. Well, she explained that Negro is black in Spanish, I believe.
Yeah.
And nigger actually is a derivative word of ignorance. You're an ignorant animal-like creature. You're not calling that person human when you use the word nigger. You're classifying them in a group of unintelligent, uncivilized savages. And she read this document. She had a lot of historical little things in her classroom, which is kind of why I dug her classroom, not gonna lie. And it was a document, that literally like gave people the title of nigger. Um, it's it was just a way of asserting power for those who were white. It once black people were able to read, they associated certain words that they had to learn. You had to learn the word colored. You had to learn the word nigger because you had to learn where you belonged. And there was a lot of, I want to say, not Cuban, but there was towards the South a lot more black people that spoke Spanish. And to incorporate or well, not spoke Spanish, of course they didn't speak Spanish, but they understood more of that language than English. They didn't understand pretty much anything, but when you tell them the two words that they need to learn in order to be categorized in the world, they use nigger and they use colored. Um, that's just like a broad overview of what that paper was saying. Like
Right.
to be freed or to walk amongst society. This was like the 60s, or this was not even far, maybe further back, maybe 20s, something closer to that. But
What is your age, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 33.
Oh, so okay, I'm 1 year older than you.
No.
Oh my gosh. Not that I don't know why I forgive me. I I did not assume you're any older. I just feel like this stuff should be happening way back. Not that it should ever happen. Please don't. But I'm just saying, like, I feel people need to wake up. Like, this stuff still happens.
Still happens.
I can't believe that those people got approved to be a foster parent.
Yeah. And I mean, they come in forms. Like, we haven't even transitioned into my children. Not just the two that are gone, but the three that are here. Because they had one instance of foster care. One. And that's a whole nother can of worms. But they are nightmare people. Like, there was one family, and I will never forget it. The dad was an acupuncturist, and the mom was a dentist, I believe. And they made sure that I slept well. They didn't let my brother beat me up. They called me down in the morning to eat breakfast at the table with them. We had dinners at the table as a family, when I was younger. And so, God, where was I? Oh yeah. And they let me eat breakfast, and I mean, it was a real breakfast. Like, there was eggs and bacon, and she made like the biggest pancake I've seen in my life. Like, the thing was like that thick. I've never seen a pancake do those things. I mean, she asked me how I was doing. Like, excuse me? Are we supposed to do that? Like, I thought that I was being fooled, and I was, because that was like the shortest stay in a foster home in history. in the history of me being in them. And they moved me around all the time. Like the day that I left, they came in, the social worker and an old social worker came in, and they were talking to them only about me, not about my brother who tried to choke me out on the stairwell. Um, and just me. And she was like, oh, well, she has these elaborate stories and she might get you guys in some trouble, so we're going to remove her. The lady busted out crying and she was like, this little girl should just stay here. You need to take him. We watched him assault her. We watched him attack her over a doll. We watched it happen. We know that it was not her. We know it was him. You need to place him with more behavioral specialty type setting, and we need to be able to love her because she just wants to be loved. And she was like, she's so smart and she's so nice to our kids, and we don't even, our foster kids always have this alienated feeling when it comes to our own children, but we want them to all feel like a unit. And she came in and she loved our kids and we love her and she should stay. And the lady was like, no, we're taking her. No. And when I left that day, the mom, she just held me forever. Like, she did not even want to let me go. And she was like, I'm sorry. She's like, I tried so hard. And she was like, I'm going to try to get you out of whatever home you go to if you don't end up going back home. And because we were going to go skiing that day, I was going to go ski. I never did that. And she was like, it's something every kid should experience. They should play in the snow, not sleep in it, because I did tell her I slept in it in one home. And she was like, they should play in it. And she was like, and don't let your beautiful brown skin be any reason for anybody to hurt you or to be mean to you. And she's still a white lady, very pretty, very nice lady. Nothing. She did nothing. And she couldn't do anything. And the father, I just hear him while I'm in the car, and he was like, you take these kids and you put them in places they don't want to be, and you do these things to them, but who's going to care about Shannon? Nobody's going to care about Shannon. I care. I want her here. I promised her certain things that I wanted to do because she deserved it. Look at her grades. Look at who she is. Why are you?
Who is this man?
This is the foster dad.
For the 2 days?
For the 2 days, yeah. Of the couple that I stayed in their house.
Why? Who made you leave?
The social worker.
Why?
Still to this day, I don't even know. They were just like, she'll get you in trouble if she makes up stories about you. And I didn't understand because when I went, they always need everything. Of course they do. And so I left a horrible home, okay, where the man was, that's the home where the guy was putting things in my body. Like he would use broomsticks and bats and just all kinds of things, not appropriate. And they took me from that home because from school, I went to the emergency room because what I thought was a period, because I didn't know what those were, blood was coming from the other part and from the back end. And so they took me to the emergency room. They said, for the interest of the state, we're just going to take you out of that home. For the interest of the state? Did you say that sentence? Because that's what they said. And they put
Not the interest of you.
Not of me.
Not the interest of you, and we're going to shut that home down and go after them. Did you tell them why your behind was bleeding?
Yeah. And I told the doctor at the hospital, when they had me in the hospital, I told them, I said, he put a baseball bat in my butt. And the guy looks at me and he's like, he did what? And he put a baseball bat in my butt.
How did that even?
It had been 2-3 months of that already. And the bleeding was just uncontrollable. Like, it was just not. So the
want to murder this person.
I want to too. Like to be honest, I want to just find them on Facebook and low key, but no, I can't. That's illegal. But he was doing it for so long, and so they came in and they took me out of that home.
For the best interest of the state.
That's the good part. And so they had taken me to the hospital again, like to a checkup on that issue. And they they take me for my regular checkup about it, and they said that there was new damage. I don't know what was going on back there, and I did not care to know. So they were talking to them about what was going on, and the lady was telling it to me the best way that she could. And at this point, I think I was about 11. And so it was easier to understand certain things. And so she was like, there's more damage back there, so you have to be really careful, and da 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 da. And it felt like I recovered in like a day. It just felt like all that pain, all that uncomfortable sitting and everything just went away in a day. And the guy, the dad, was an acupuncturist, and he was like, I'll see what I can do for you. And I was like, don't poke me with a bunch of needles. That's terrifying. And he was like, I would never do that. And he took me to his office, and we drank tea together, and I got to watch him do acupuncture on this guy's arm and his shoulder. And after that, I felt like incredible. Like, it was awesome. So maybe it wasn't a couple of days. It felt to me like I was in their home for a couple of days, but maybe it was like a week or so. Being more realistic. And so it was amazing. From the moment I got there, he cared enough to help me, help me feel like better and not have that nightmare lingering over me. And then just to be yanked right out of there at that moment, it was just ridiculous. Like, all in all, these people, they take these kids in and they don't know what they need. And my goal in life after going through all of that, all I wanted to do was mom. I was the known babysitter from the time I was probably 9. And kids became my whole life, my whole world. And I wanted to foster. I wanted to be there for them. I wanted to love them in the way that they needed it. But unfortunately, once you're a ward of the state, you become somebody that just can't do it. They just start becoming involved at every moment that they possibly can. And that literally was from the moment my oldest was born. And that's what eventually led to them being gone.
So let's start with your kids.
I'm going to call him Eric. I met Eric's father in Urban Peak. It's like a homeless shelter for teenagers.
Just out of curiosity, is that his real name?
No.
Okay, good.
No, yeah. And so he told me he was gay. Eric's father told me he was gay. And that him and his boyfriend wanted a family, and his grandmother didn't allow it, so she put him out. So that's how he ended up in the shelter where I was. And I was like, well, you're cool. We vibed on music. Sorry, I had to put these pokey things out of my sleeve. We vibed over music. He was this cool guy, and I ended up getting an apartment because I was given a grant through the program. I was making a 4.3 GPA. I was working and doing all the things the program required, so they gave me a voucher for 18 months for an apartment. And then they said that it would segue into a grant that is given to kids who emancipate out of foster care. I'm sorry. So I told him, you know, if he ever just wanted to get out of the shelter and hang out, you know, he can come over and he can hang out. Well, he came over one night and I made him some dinner and he had to be back at the shelter by 5 because that was his curfew time. And so he was like, "Can I just stay the night?" And I was like, "Well, no, because you got to be back to shelter so you can get, you know, through the program," because he needed some help from them. You know, they offer different things that I felt he needed, like counseling and things like that. And he steadily kind of forced his way into my house. He was very manipulative, looking back, of course. And he would say things like, "Oh, I missed my curfew. Can I come over? Because they won't let me back in." And of course, I'm big hearted. So I'm like, "Yeah, of course, bud. Yeah, come on in, whatever." And then one morning I woke up and he was in my apartment, but I had my door locked and he was not there the night before. And he was like, "Oh, I had your keys because you left them on the bus, and so I brought them over, but I didn't want to just leave them at the door, so I wanted to bring them in." He was like, "Okay," but he was making breakfast and he was setting it on my counter because we didn't have a kitchen table at the time. And it was about 6 in the morning because I lived right across the street from my high school, so I just go down the stairs, across the street, I'm at school. And he was like, "Well, you want to eat with me before class?" I was like, "No, because I'm going to go to school, but you need to go." And he was like, "Well, um, the shelter closes. They close for a couple hours to motivate certain kids in the program have to leave for an amount of hours to go find a job, to try to get in school, whatever they needed to do for their tasks." And he was like, "You know, they're closed right now. Can I hang out?" I was like, "It's fine, whatever. I'm not here." Um, and I was working two jobs and I was going to school. And I came home after my second job. I was teaching drumming to kids. And he was still there, which it was slightly bothersome, but I was like, "Okay, well, it's time to go. You know, you want to hit that 5 o'clock hour. Um, you want to hit that 5 o'clock hour, so, you know, go on and head to the shelter." At that point, he started crying in my living room. And he was like, "I thought you were in love with me too." I'm not on the same page as you.
How old were you and how old was he?
I was 19 and so was he.
Okay.
And he was like, "Can we be together? Blah, 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 blah." And he wanted to start this relationship. And I was, and I was like, "Well, I can't I can't say yes to a relationship because I'm fairly young." And to be honest, I was absolutely head over heels for my best friend. So there was no way that I was going to become involved with him. And I was like, "But if you just want, you know, somebody you can talk to, I know a few people that you can talk to, you know." And he was like, "I think I'm just having a hard time with being gay because my grandma doesn't like it and nobody likes it, and I just want to be straight and maybe that'll make them happy." And I was like, "No, do you the best you. Like if you're gay, dude, do it up, you know, be you." And he was like, "I really just want a son for me and my boyfriend." And I was like, "Well, you know, that's another time that we can talk about it if you know it's just hard times with your boyfriend or whatever." But from that day on, he did not leave. He didn't leave for a couple weeks. And all of a sudden, he became pretty demanding of me. We went to a restaurant on Valentine's Day with his cousin. And he had these moments where he needed, or he felt he needed to front like he was straight. And so me being the wing woman or whatever you would call me, I was just like, "Yeah, bro, I got you," or "Yeah, sis, I got you," you know, whatever. Now he's not that accepting. That's hard. So we went out on Valentine's Day, and he and his cousin are chatting it up, you know, having a good time or whatever, and he just starts tripping. And I mean, like, he's like, oh, you guys are really happy together. How long have you known each other? I'm sorry, we came in the same vehicle and I met him at the same time. So I don't know. And that's how I responded, because half of me is just sarcastic. Sarcasm probably coming from a defense mechanism that I've had for years, or just the fact that I put a funny twist on things. Um, and this is known. This is known for people that know me. So they know I'm sarcastic. And he's like, oh, what do you mean by that? You want to go home with him? Da 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 da. And he starts going off. And I'm just like, what? So I'm in my little heels, my little wedges, and I walk home. I go from the cafe to my house. It's not that far. I can make it. And he gets back to my house and he beats me relentlessly. And I'm like, what is going on? And at this point, I'm going to fight back. I'm not going to stand there and take it, because I don't know what's going on. Because at first it started with an argument. He just wanted to argue about what happened and why was I flirting and all this other stuff. And it's not convincing that he's straight if I'm flirting with other men. And I'm just like, I was there to support you. That's it. That's my only reason for being there. It began this cycle of him coming into my apartment, him fighting me all the time, physical harm constantly. It was never a relationship. It was always, I'm forcing my way into your life. I conceived Eric after I had put a restraining order against Rob. Call him Rob. And Rob came into my apartment and he raped me. This was after he had cut me up pretty bad with a knife. And that night, I was taking sleep medication because I was working both jobs and I was suffering from insomnia. And so my best friend was having her 21st birthday. And I was like, yo, I'm not 21, so I'm not going to drink. And plus, I'm on medication, so I'm good. And her friend was making margaritas, and I was just like, just don't put the booze in mine, and I'll just have an icy drink. And well, of course, long story short, there was alcohol in the drink. He didn't intend it that way, but he did not.
Right.
Yeah. And so I get home, and I just remember getting in the shower, getting out, and getting hit over the head. There's a scar on my head somewhere from getting hit. Just bam, right in my face.
Do you know what it was?
It's a post from my nightstand. I had made a nightstand. It was like this little drawer that fell apart, and then these table legs that I filed down and made a nightstand. And he took one and he bopped me in the head with it. And I remember my friend coming in, and she was like, yo, are you okay? I was taking the trash out, but your door was open and you're butt naked right now. And I was like, what? And she was like, you're butt naked, and why is your face bleeding? And I was like, oh my God, what happened? Neither one of us knew. And neither one of us did anything, to be honest, which we should have. We should have done some things. And I didn't think of anything that happened the night before. I was like, I think I got out the shower and I bumped my head, but how did I end up all the way in the living room? There's like a division of a sliding door between my bathroom. Then my bathroom's in this general area between the two sliding doors, and then my bedroom's here, and my living room's in front of that slidden area. So it's about a rectangular space of my bathroom and shower and vanity area, and then my living room and kitchen. And so I was like, there's no way if I hit my head coming out of the shower that I would have made it all the way in the living room, but maybe I did. And then she tells me, she's like, yo, I think Mike put alcohol in your drink. And I was like, oh, well, that explains that. And I wrapped it up like that. 3 days later, I was supposed to be on my period, and I wasn't. And so I asked my doctor, I was like, so I'm not really ever late, but can we run some tests to see what's going on? And he was like, well, yeah, so come in take a pregnancy test, and I'm pregnant. And I asked him, I was like, do people become pregnant and not aware of it? Like, is there other ways? Because in my childhood, I didn't have the sex talk, the period talks. I didn't have all those things. I had scientific basis of how children are made, so I knew how they were made, but I didn't know much about sex at all. I lost my virginity at 19, and was raped immediately at 20. So I was not really aware. Well, I was still 19, I think, actually. I really wasn't aware of ever having sex outside of that one time. And so I thought, well, maybe I can have a period this whole time and be like really huge pregnant and not even know, because it was months before that. And he was like, no, you're about a couple of weeks. So when I go back, I'm like, that's the night I was naked on the floor. And I put it all together, of course, and I realized that now I'm pregnant with Rob's child, and Rob has this restraining order, and when was Rob in my house? And I go home. I get off work a couple weeks later, and Rob's at my balcony, which means he went through my apartment already and is on my balcony. And I can see him before I go into the apartment. And I was like, dude, why are you here? Why are you here? Leave. You have a restraining order. Leave. And he's like, no, we need to talk, blah, blah, blah. And he jumps down from the balcony down to where I am. And he grabs my hair and he grabs my clothes and he's got me kind of hemmed up like this and he's dragging me inside. And again, being a victim of abuse for so long, you gotta know when to fight it and when not to. Well, at this point, I'm pregnant. I don't want to have a moment where he's got a knife or he's doing anything ridiculous. And that day, he go into the apartment, and he starts throwing things at me, and I must have fallen asleep. It must be the narcolepsy. I don't remember how I ended up asleep. But I woke up and my hands are tied, my legs are tied, and he's got these long lighters, and he's trying to set me on fire. And he takes a knife and he lights it. And he tries to cut me. He was like, you're not going to have my first kid. You're not going to have my first kid. And I don't know how he knew I was pregnant. He kept pushing me down with the knife. I've got the scars of where he would push me down on my shoulders with the knife, on both of my shoulders. And he kept trying to set me on fire. Now, I want to say it was jazz and ballet and tap or just my survival or my first maternal survival instinct. But he got up and he would take these thizzles. I don't know what thizzles are, but it's some kind of drug in a pill. And he would get really ridiculous. And he left and he went in the bedroom and he was like, yeah, I'm going to thizzle this up real quick and I'll be right back for the rest of you. And I got up. I wiggle, I kind of did a slide over underneath my couch. I keep 2 knives, just my own little security there. And I grabbed one, put it behind me, and I got back where he had me. And he was like, did you move? I was like, no. And he was like, no, what? And I was like, no, sir. And he was like, you moved, didn't you? No, I didn't move. And while he was screaming at me, I was taking my arms free and taking because my legs and arms were tied behind me. So I'm kind of in this weird folded position on the floor. And I'm cutting my hands out and I take that knife and I cut him. I cut right into his arm and I was like, I'm not going to stop swinging until you're dead. If you get away from me, it'll be the best moment of your life. And I got him. He's got a massive scar on his arm from this event, okay? From this event happening. And this is after, of course, months of being beaten, black eyes, bruises, and the whole 9. And my worker managed to get me out of my lease and into another place because I had to, of course, get away from there because he always knew I was there. And I'm bound by this lease because of the housing voucher or whatever you call it. There wasn't a way for me to just go unless it was authorized by him. And so I go into my new apartment and I had my son. Now, in a previous video, I was saying that, you know, a lot of cases are because of spiteful and vengeful and horrible families. And I had just given birth to him. He was brand new. And a social worker comes to my door and she's like, we have reports that your son is extremely malnourished and that you're not feeding him properly and that he's not growing and we have concerns. And I bring her in and she's like, and your house is destroyed and I mean all these other things. There is a single bassinet sitting next to me at the table with my book because that's all we did together was read. I didn't even have a TV or anything, so we just read together. And I show her his paper from his doctor, which is conveniently placed downstairs across the small alleyway right there at his doctor's office. And I show her that not only had he not lost weight, but he has more than tripled his weight. He was 5 pounds, 5 pounds, 5 ounces. He's 5'5". And he was at 35 weeks. So he was early, but he was still very healthy size-wise for being early. But I showed her the paper where it said he was 16 pounds already. And that's strictly breastfed, and that's a couple of weeks after he's born. And she's like, oh, well, this is completely wrong. And I was like, well, I don't know who you're getting your information from, but, you know, you need to check more thoroughly because I have aunts that, of course, took me in, as they say, after my mom died. They were just nightmares. And they didn't like the fact that I said, I don't want them to do to my son what they did to me. And so they called, and that was the first time.
Now, question, somebody wants to know,
Mm-hmm.
did you press charges?
On Rob, I went to the police. I did call the police. I did tell them what happened. I told them that he said that it was his son. And I told them about the attack. I said that he said it was his. But they said because they cannot prove that the baby that I'm carrying belongs to him, they can't get him for rape. And because they can't find him after the assault, that all they would do is look for him. They said that they would find him and then press the charges accordingly. From that particular attack, they had me on video with my face swollen and beaten in and all of that. And they said, and so they didn't really pursue anything. He went and he did go to jail for one of the assaults. Yes, it's in that box at the bottom. And they did the restraining order. They put him in jail. He was supposed to be on probation, but he just avoided everything for years. He just skipped over it. He didn't go to probation or anything like that. I kept on the police for a while because I just didn't want to be found. After he was born, I definitely didn't want to be found. But they said, well, his restraining order is still in place. So if he comes within so odd feet of you, we can be called then, and then we can do something about it, but not until that moment. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll call you when I'm dead, whatever, you know, that's how they felt about it. It's like after something happens, that's when we can do something. And I told them something did happen, but they still didn't do anything. They were like, well, we'll let you know. And after a while, they stopped taking calls from me because they were like, you're being relentless to us, as though there's something we can do about it. I thought that was your job, but whatever. I ended up leaving the condo that I was in with him because Rob's relatives um, started to, his sister more particularly, started to harass me um, at the condo. Um, and so I left and I went to Colorado Springs. My brother was staying with the person that I ended up staying with the person that I knew. And my brother ended up moving in with her, and that put me out of place. And so I didn't know that. I went to go visit my aunt because I was trying to repair things because I did have a baby, and I was thinking, okay, family is important, and, all the things that come along with that. And my cousin was being harassed by someone, and they just wanted to make peace with everybody. So I was like, okay, well, I went out there, spent a little time, and my aunt was like, oh, well, this holiday is coming up. And she was like, oh, Thanksgiving is coming up, so you want to hang out until after Thanksgiving? I was like, that's fine. Then she said, after Christmas. And I was like, that's fine. Then she said, after Valentine's Day. And I'm like, okay, now you're just pushing the envelope. What do you need, And she kind of went off on me because I asked. And I was like, I belong in Colorado Springs. I live there. And she was like, well, actually, you don't. And Liz called us and said that Aaron is staying there and you can't stay there. And so I got kind of tossed aside, more or less. And I came back to my aunt's house, and my cousins were mad because something was going on. And at that point, I had to leave. I went walking out of the house because they were screaming, hollering, and it became this whole violent scene. I just didn't want a part of it. And so I started walking with him in a car seat. And I was to meet my friend at this park. But my phone died. And it was just this little minute phone, and I only had a few minutes left, and then it died. So I didn't, after telling her where I was, I just waited there because there was nothing else I could do. And this lady who saw me sitting there with him, he was warm. He had blanket after blanket. His food was already provided. He was warm, but we were waiting. There was nothing else I could do at that point. It was probably 2 in the morning or so. There wasn't a way for me just to be like, hey, neighbor, can I? There was none of that. And so my friend didn't come. And I think she tried to find us, but she couldn't because there was no way of contacting us. I don't know what the deal was at that time. I didn't know. And so this lady, she called the police. The police assumed the worst. A friend of mine reassures them that it's not that. And they found a shelter for me pretty quickly, until I could figure out, start a job, get another place to stay, figure out what city I'm going to be living in, and what's going on with everything I own in Colorado Springs and everything I have, And so I was there in the shelter probably a week. And I had already gotten a job, and I had already found an apartment. And my another aunt was to meet with me at the church so that I can get some documentation printed out and get it to the apartment. But that day, Eric got really sick. He wasn't feeling good. So Eric is asthmatic because that's genetically from my mother and me and everybody else on my side.
How old is he, by the way, at this point?
Huh?
How old is he at this point?
Eric was probably about 1. Okay. He was about D1. No, he was about 1. We go. I take him to the hospital. The shelter I was staying at is like this makeshift hotel that they turned into a shelter. So you have this wide array of people around all the time. Heavy smokers, people outside in the main areas. And so his clothes and my clothes and pretty much the whole shelter smelled like a shelter with smoke, excuse me, with cigarette smoke and, you know, just shelter smell. It's this concocted smell of combination of smells, you know. So when we went to the hospital, um, no, the doctors and nurses, they did not mind what was happening. The lady was like, I'm so proud of even getting to meet you. You're this strong mom, and you and your baby are just so adorable together. I've never seen a mom love their child like this. Mind you, I skipped a little part. I'm going to go back for a second because it's kind of relevant. When I was in the hospital giving birth to Eric, Rob came to the hospital. My restraining order was still very much active. The nurse there was like, "You look like you're in love," and I was like, I guess I am. I don't know what you mean." And she's like, "You look like you're in love with your baby." And when she had said that, I hear Rob in the hallway talking about, "Oh no, you're in love with me. You're going to be with me for the rest of your life because I have AIDS." What? And so I was like, he's not supposed to be here if that's who I think that is. And can you call the police for me? They didn't. They let him. Horrible. So when I went to the hospital that day, as he was not feeling well, the nurse that was there when Rob came in, and she was like, "I remember you. You're the one who had the baby with the guy who was crazy." And I was like, yeah, that sums it up pretty neatly. And she was like, "You're incredible, and all of us still remember you. And do you mind if I bring one of the other nurses in here, because she'd be so excited to see how cute he is?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." When she brought her in, I got a call about my apartment, or about the shelter I was in, and they needed a document so that I did not have to leave that day because something got crossed. They thought that I was supposed to leave that day, but it was the next 2 days I was supposed to be there. Then I was moving into my apartment. So they said, "Well, you've got to come and you've got to bring this down here, da 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 da." Well, the nurse offered to stay with Eric while I went to do that. And they were like, "Well, you have to come, you have to get all your stuff and you have to bring it here, or you have to get it out of your room because you're not going to be here another day." And so I was like, "I got to figure out a few things." And she was like, "Don't worry about it. We'll get you like a cubby that we give for parents who have extended stays, you know, with more severely sick children. So don't worry about it. We'll help you out." And I was like, "That's awesome." As I'm heading back, because I fixed the issue at the shelter, it was a paperwork issue. And I'm heading back. My aunt calls me and tells me that I need to go down to the church. And I was like, "I can't. I have to go back to the hospital." I was like, "Excuse me?" And she was like, "Well, when we went in there, the nurses were concerned because he smelled like cigarettes and you don't have anywhere to live." I was like, "That's not the conversation I had with the nurses. So what's going on?" Well, I get down to the church and they tell me that, "Oh, I don't have stable living and I need to get stable." Well, I'm getting stable. The shelter provides this voucher provides this rent and deposit, the first month's rent and deposit, for single mothers with children. Well, once he got placed with my aunt for like a week and then into foster care for the remaining time he was out of my care, I was disqualified for the voucher. And then the apartment that I was getting into was rented out. So I had to get a wide array of different jobs and go to different shelters because while single mothers have some shelter options, single women have the least amount of shelter options in Denver. There is more options for single men. There is more options for everyone else but a single woman. So you have this finite amount of shelters you can go into, and you must qualify either being, having an addiction or being of domestic violence or being some kind of an emergency situation. So I ended up going from place to place trying to figure out how to re-stabilize us because of the interruption of this plan. It's our usual vibe. We gotta understand one another. And so I found out that because I did not give her power of attorney over my son when all of this started, she was upset and called social workers. She was the one that called him the first time, saying he called him the second time when he was actually removed from me the very first time. I got into this wonderful shelter back into the condo that I was in prior to leaving to Colorado Springs. I found that Rob's sister was incarcerated, so I was okay to go back to where I was. That person said that she got a voucher from the place that I was staying for 2 months rent and my deposit. She just had to fill out her own paperwork and they filled out theirs, and that's how they kind of met in the middle there. She tells them that, or I get a notice on my door, and it says that I never gave her a deposit. And I called her and I said, you have to talk to the shelter because remember, they're the ones with the voucher. They don't give it to me. She was like, oh, okay. So the next morning, as I'm ready to go to work, 3 officers are at my door serving me a piece of paper, telling me I need to be in court. And I was like, for what? And they were like, you can't go into an apartment squatting in an apartment. And I was like, I'm not squatting here. And she was like, the officer tells me, well, I don't know what's going on, but you were here and then you left here and you can't just make your way back in. And I was like, well, that's not what happened. And so I called her, but didn't get an answer. We go to court. She says, oh, well, I evicted her from this unit already, but she didn't. I moved because I had to move. And she decided to come back on her own, and she does not even have a lease. But I did. I literally had the lease that we signed in the shelter so that she could get the voucher. And I was like, I haven't even been here for a month. And they gave her 2 months rent and deposit. So I ended up leaving that condo. I stayed with my best friend. Everything was fine for a while. I ended up going back to the shelter because when I started school, and I had to follow certain criteria in order to get the voucher for children who emancipated from foster care, which I had been waiting for at this point over a year and a half, if not more. And so they said that you have to have shelter stay for 6 months. And I was like, well, that's extended. But it was only 2 months before, and I qualified then, but I had to go 6 months. So the lady of the shelter that I had left from, she was like, come on back. We'll work it out. We'll be fine. We can get it together. At which point I met of the 2 children who are not in my care. Again, not his name. Pretty nice. He was worried about my narcolepsy, and he was like, you have to move in with me. I was like, cool, I guess. His family's Hispanic. I'm Black, of course. And did not know there was a stigma there, but there is. His mother had a billion assumptions about who I was. Let's say Adam's father's name is Luke. Luke was kind of a loner. He was extremely depressed. He didn't have anybody. He didn't feel like he had anybody. And his family, when we first met, they were all excited. They were like, oh my God, yeah, this is great. They were like, he's getting off the couch. He is, doing regular grooming of himself, combing his hair, getting out of his regular everyday clothes, And so they were really excited. They were like, you're a really good thing for him. He loves you. He loves Eric. Everything's, great. But then all of a sudden, like I said, his mother had all these toxic ideas about who I was, just based upon being a black person. His aunts, his brothers, they would start to be so rude, belligerent. It was insane. Um, and it all happened right after I found out I was pregnant. Wanted that. He was like, I want to be a dad more than anything in the world. It's me and you against all of them. And I made the mistake of telling him that he should respect his mother. I don't, it sounds weird to say that sentence, but when he had less respect for her, she had less control over him. Um, and as years have gone on, and as I've had his three other children, I began to understand him more.
So
Go ahead.
you said you have 5 kids. They're all from that guy?
Rob is Eric's.
Okay.
Is the father of my other 4.
Who?
Luke.
Okay.
Luke is the father of the other 4. So the 3 that are here, and Luke has autism. He never knew it. He didn't know it. He still has not made that, awareness of himself. But because I have mothered 4 of his children, his 4 sons, all 3 of them are on the spectrum. It's not to assume that he is based on that information, but it is to assume a lot of their behaviors, a lot of their development, a lot of who they are and how they understand things are autism related. Any block there would be an autism related block, if that makes sense. I can say to Kenny right now, Apple, and he's gonna say, you hate me and you hate me because I'm an apple and you don't like me. You don't like apples. Totally not what I said. But that comes from not having regulated social behavioral mentalities. And emotional irregulation is a big part of being autistic. I say these things because Luke eventually became a puppet for his mother. And to some of Luke's faults, but not much, Luke was unaware of why his behaviors, why the things he was doing wasn't important. And to give a good example of that, the day that I went into labor with Adam, Luke did not want to go to the hospital because Luke had to wake up early to go to a food stamp appointment for his mother. Luke didn't understand which one of those 2 things was more important. And at the moment when I was in it, I can say, what is wrong with this guy? Who the heck is he? What's up with him? Now I have this peaceful understanding slightly of that behavior. When I went to the hospital, by the time I got there, Adam was pretty much walking out of there. Like he was out. Like there was no epidural, there was no time, there was nothing. Luke wanted to name Adam something else. Eric wanted to name his brother Adam. That's what he wanted. And while all of this is going on, my cousin takes me to the hospital. The doctor who delivered Eric is delivering Adam, and she's like, oh, Shannon's great. She did ballet. Watch this. And she takes my leg and goes all like this with it. And they're having all these general conversations while I'm having a brother, according to Eric's words. They put Eric at the end of the bed. Nobody was thinking in those moments. Eric was very caring. He was like, oh, it's okay, Mom. You're going to have a brother. It's okay, Mommy. You're going to have a brother. It's super sweet of him. He was really trying to calm me in that moment. So I had Adam, and the nurse staff were just like, we don't get moms like you very often. You just know what's going on. You just all in. and I'd been caring for kids since I was one, so it was easy for me. And a social worker goes into the hospital after you have the baby. If you're on programs like Medicaid or anything like that, they come in, they tell you about Medicaid, they tell you about WIC, they tell you about general things that you need as far as welfare or assistance goes after you have a baby. Kind of genius idea, kind of. But the moment she came in, the phone rings. And she's like, oh, you can go ahead and answer that. Everything in me regrets answering that call. Sarah, his mother, said that I can no longer go back to their home because Luke thought that for some reason I intentionally did not give him his last name. He said that I intentionally, and he thought that I had a child with someone else. And so he said that because Sarah said so, that I'm no longer allowed back in their home, not me, after watching his brother be born. And Luke swore that I intentionally gave him only my last name. That's not what I did. Luke had to sign a document stating that he to receive his last name. Why? Because it protects him from being accused of being a father when he's not the father.
Right.
And he was like, well, you know I'm his father. Why can't you do it? Because I'm not you. I'm not you. And this should have been my son. I should have known these things dealing with him at these stages, but I didn't. I wasn't aware of what his needs were. I didn't know that he was autistic. I didn't, but now I do. Now I know. A lot of his behaviors were inevitable. And so I'm thinking this in this time, well, his mom put me out. There's nothing I can do about it. I just need to come up with another plan. Well, the social worker was sitting there hearing all of this. And she was like, don't worry about it. I'll take care of getting you somewhere to stay. I'll take care of everything else. And if I can't finish everything, I'm going to give the remainder of the things that need to be done to the next person who's going to be on the clock after I get off work. And I was like, that's fine. Well, I had applied for a low-income apartment, and there was 5 people on the waiting list, and there were 4 apartments. And I think I was number like 3. And my aunt called the apartments, and she was like, well, this person's in this position on your wait list. Can we move her ahead? Can she get the first apartment over the first person on the waiting list? The guy was super cool about it. And so she talks to the guy. The guy's super cool about it. He's like, send me some documents stating why she needs it above everybody else on this waiting list, and I can get her moved in within the hour. Fine. Awesome. Cool beans. I'm set, right? Well, this person comes in and she proceeds to ask me all kinds of questions, telling me this and this and that, and she leaves. All of a sudden they're coming and they're getting Adam. And I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, well, you have to check out today, and he's going to foster care. I gave birth to a very healthy 7-pound baby. He had Mark from sitting in the birth canal, kind of in and out for the amount of time he did before he was born. But that's natural. Like, I can't remember. Hematoma is what it's called, I think. And he had one from being born. When I got to the hospital, he was about here. So he had a mark on his head from that. Outside of that, everything was healthy. He had a little jaundice. We did the UV lights. Everything was healthy. On the first court date, I showed them that I had a place it was a different place than what I had planned because that was a 2-bedroom and I needed my sons on the lease. Um, and the the program was for, you know, families with children. So this other place was this house that was converted into miniature apartments. And we were going to proceed with that. The attorney that I had in the first place, she was awesome. She was like, this is how we're going to go about it. This is how I'm going to represent you. This is how we're going to get this closed out almost right away because it doesn't need to proceed this way. So we get into court, and that's exactly in the direction it's going. The doctors at the hospital were doing nothing but applauding me as a parent. The social worker that was there in the beginning, she backed exactly what I was saying. Even the guy that was going to rent me the apartment, he was like, I met the two of them. I met her and loved the two of them. And I would want nothing more than provide them with an apartment. If you can provide me a document that states why I'm still able to give her this 2-bedroom without her kids being here, I'm still willing to do it. The judge was ready. Everyone's ready to do exactly that. And we dismiss from the court date, and they say, well, you're going to have a meeting with us in the office the next week. Sweet. So I'm thinking my 1-week-old and my 2-year-old are going to be home. I get a call 2 days after court. They tell me, and severely underweight. Now, I had breastfed in visits, and I told them, you know, soy formula only, please no Similac. Similac almost killed me, almost killed my sister, my brother, everybody in my family. We do not do Similac at all. Don't know what it's about. Just know I'm going to avoid that. And I'm going to do soy only because it's always been that way. Even Eric went through phases when he was in daycare. When they would run out of my breast milk, they would give him regular formula and it wouldn't go down. But the soy was fine. So I told them the very same thing. They told me I had to buy whatever foster mom was giving him, but that's not what I wanted. And so they tell me he is underweight. Now I'm thinking, okay, maybe he lost a couple of pounds. My child is almost 4 pounds. Almost. He is not quite 4 pounds yet. When I go to see him, he looks like bones, like straight up bones. And the visit right before that, he was probably a month old, maybe at max.
4 pounds at a month old.
Yeah. And when he was born, he was 7 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And so he was like 3 pounds and some ounces. He hadn't even quite gotten 4 pounds. And Eric kept saying, they don't give Adam a bottle. I said, well, Adam is breastfed by mommy. No, mommy, the Stevens family does not give Adam a bottle. I was like, what do they give him? Water and salt. Now, Eric had developed mentally well beyond the age of 2. He could define audacity. He was speaking way early, to the point where I was filling out packets for 3 months on everything that I did with an intelligent child, to the point where the social worker was aware, foster parents were aware, everyone was aware of Eric's intelligence. And so I told the social worker at that point, she was like, well, we are telling you that you need to provide the milk that your foster parent gives him. And if he doesn't have enough milk, then maybe you should be buying it for him. Okay. But, okay. And so I kind of mummed it down. Like, he hadn't even been a month. He was probably 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old, maybe. Maximum 3 weeks. And when I get to the hospital, they say, oh, you have to go to the courthouse now. You have to be there by 3. I was like, okay. They had an emergency hearing to mandate that I, by law, cannot breastfeed my son. They blamed me breastfeeding him the 2 times a week I visited my child to be the reason why my child was now less than 4 pounds. And after that became worse over visits. Became very timid. Didn't want food from a visit to get on his clothes because he said I would be in big, big trouble. For punished for making a kid mess. He afraid to speak up. He would just want in visits to sit in my lap and take a nap. He just kept wanting to sit in my lap and take a nap. They were allowing Luke, they would change visit dates, they would keep switching things up, back and forth, back and forth. One time I was outside after a visit, and foster family left out the front door. The mother, Eric, is saying, we're going to go to Wally World or Walmart. And the foster parents saying, it's Wally World, not Walmart, or something like that. It's either way. I think it's Eric was saying Walmart. Foster mom was saying. So she was berating him about it. She was like, why do you have to be out loud in public so stupid? He's 2. What are you doing? It's whatever I call it. It's whatever I call it. It's a store. Nobody cares. Who are you? Oh, you're so cute. And so she's laying in him, and I do not like him. And Eric is full of tears. I watch her take Adam in the car seat, toss the car seat into a van. Like this. It was not even small. It was throwing a car seat with a child in it into a car. Grabbing Eric by his arm, screaming in his face, it's called Wally World, and putting him in the car. And I'm like, if your patients aren't that big, tell me what size they are, because they're probably here. You should not be caring for children with this much patience. Period. And so it just steadily got worse. When I would see Adam, when I would see Eric would have markings all over him. Adam would have bruises completely up his back constantly. The things that bothered me most, that these people ignored completely, were huge. Adam's shoulders began to set up like this, and they wouldn't come down. They would sit in this position. So they started physical therapy. Adam's ribs were set inward, were consistently in a curled position. Little member was crooked, because if you literally trace over his injuries, you can see a 5-point harness from a car seat out. He would say, no, Mom, he can't come out of there. If he comes out of there, you're going to be in trouble. Adam belongs loved, held, cuddled, everything else, but not in his car seat. They started to blame these injuries on me. These are inset markings of a child in this position, curled up in this position for a majority of his life. Came to a visit with a knot on his head and a line going through that knot. Now, I've seen boys be boys enough to know when a boy hits a corner at a speed and probably knocks himself silly. I've seen it. My nephew is really wild. And so I asked, why? Like, I know he's mixed. I know what's going on here, but he looks like a sheep. And I also know how melanin works, and I know there was a touch in there when he was born. So what's going on now? They were like, oh, he's fine. I was like, what's with this? Oh, it's nothing. Okay. I go in, I feed him. I didn't want to. His eyes were doing this whole time, wiggling back and forth. And I was like, is something going on? I know a concussion when I see one. I said something about it. I said, has he been checked? They said no. And I said, so if he eats and he starts to throw up, they were like, no, he's fine. He doesn't have a concussion. Okay. I feed him. And I go on about my day. It's his favorite little baby food, favorite one. And I go on, and Luke goes back for his part of the visit. At this point, we used to have 2 hours of a visit. I'd have an hour, he'd have an hour. They cut us down to 1 hour. He has 30 minutes, I have 30 minutes. And Luke tells me spewing vomit, spewing it. And they had to cut his visit short because Adam wouldn't stop throwing up. I looked her dead in her face and I said, do you not see the knot and the scratch on his head? They blamed that on me. They said, you scratched him. I scratched him on the forehead, causing a knot about this high. I did that. In what part of the visit did you see that happen? They couldn't tell me. They couldn't tell me at all. Disneyland with these people. Now, when a kid goes to Disneyland, I anticipated Eric to tell me all about Mickey and Donald and everything and everyone and everything. He said, Mommy, we went to Disneyland Hotel. Okay. Yeah, there's hotels in Disneyland. Yeah. What did you go ride? There's not rides in hotels, Mom. But what did you do in Disneyland? We went to the hotel. Okay. So you guys all just hung out at the hotel? No, I did by myself for a long time. They go out and then they come back for me. But we would stay at the hotel. What? And he's like, but Mommy, look at my face and my arms. I was like, why? He said, because the Stevens dad threw me in the bathtub because I refused to stand on a towel. And I said, what? And he said, the same thing. And I said, this is in a visit. Okay, so they got the cameras on me, they got the people through the mirrors, they got the folks sitting right there hearing the same thing I'm hearing. The one in the room got up, and I said, no, please don't interrupt him. She's like, no, I want to know what he's talking about. Cool, because anybody else would shut him down and say what he was saying is false. So they take me out of the room. And we talked for a minute about what he said. He described it in great detail. He said the tub was empty. He said they had just gotten out of a bath, not getting in, they were getting out of a bath. And he was standing on the bathroom floor. And the father would bathe with them naked. And he had to stand on the towel, but the towel wasn't big enough for the both of them to stand on it. You're going to stand my 3-year-old son next to a naked man, okay, 3 years old, your face is pretty much junk town for at least a couple of years. So because my son refused to stand with your dick in your in his face, you want to tell me that you picked him up and threw him in the tub? That's what he said. Now, during Luke's portion of the visit, they took a doll and they set it down on the chair. And no, that's not what happened. And so they kind of set him down a little bit more, like more of a little, okay? He was like kind of like that, but faster. So the lady takes the doll, hurls him on the couch. Bathtub. Did they remove my son?
No.
No. Because in that time frame, we get this little notice that Rob is now a part of the case. Now, I'm letting them know what Rob did, who Rob is. They're like, well, that's not what's going on. He's just a very concerned father, and if we can get to have to grow up in foster care. Now that's just going progressively getting worse in health, in limited mobility. My child cannot walk at one. He cannot do almost everything. He cannot do. Some of it's associated with autism because he had that blink, I can't connect with you or look you in your eyes look that I now have become classically aware of. But he was not given the opportunity to develop at all. They would feed him salt, how they would let him sit in the car seat and scream. They would put the car seat in the crib, the car seat with him in it in the crib. He did not want to go potty because he did not want the Steven's dad to put his hands on his junk all the time. These things became more and more and more phenomenal.
Who's putting hands on whose?
To put his hands on his junk all the time. Yeah. The case was, of course, a year, because you only have a year if they're under the age of 5, to get them back, because they will, quote unquote, bond with other people. Thank you, Pumpkin. Go. And so you can't wait for more than a year. So I began, after hearing that Rob could very possibly have seeing that Luke was steadily being forced ill. They said that this foster parent specialized in sick children. My child was her first one. She never cared for a sick child, let alone any other child, as a foster parent or as a parent. There would be times where so sunshiny, bubblegum, cat and candy, and the very next visit, he is completely, like, you can tell his face is sunk in. He hasn't probably eaten since the last time I saw him. He's got diaper rash that's so bad, it's going up to the middle of his back. The middle of his back. And if that doesn't tell you that my child is in a car seat position his whole life, aside from the 5-point injuries that he's sustaining, he has markings going down his neck on both sides from the straps. But everybody's ignoring this. With all these things happening, I received this horrible letter in the mail once telling me some terrible stuff was going on in the home. I don't know if it was real. I don't know if it was fake. I don't know. All I know is I read it and I wanted to vomit. It just depicted molestation, neglectful behaviors, violence, the whole nine in that home. And I got to the point where I wasn't suicidal. I can't say that I would want to take my life, but I can say that my innate nature to preserve my life was gone. I didn't have a reason to preserve my life. I was standing in the middle of Colfax, along one of the busiest roads in Denver, and I honestly felt that if the light turned green and something plowed me over, I would not move out of the way. And so when that thought came, I called someone. Sweetie, you gotta go find it. You're so big. Yes, take off with my drink. Go ahead. Go. Let you by. And I knew that there was a problem. I never had that issue before, but I knew there was a problem because I felt I did have that issue when I was young, going through those things. And so I was like, I can't not live for them. But being a mom, caring for children, all of those dreams that I had, they're gone. These are dreams that I was passionate about from the time I was young. Looking in the little National Geographic books and you see like all the hungry kids. And I told myself, I want to be their mom. I want to feed them and I want to clothe them, but most importantly, I just want to love them. Because who is loving them? If their parents keep dying, who's going to love them? And so all those things were gone for me. And I didn't have a reason to want to maintain my own life. And I checked myself in to a facility. And it was funny because I went in there and they do this protocol 72 hours, you're under watch, you can't do anything, you have to go to these little counseling sessions. And the therapist there did one thing for me that I needed to do. And he said, picture that first house and that first assault happened to you, and pick up 6-year-old you and hug her and tell her that you're going to live for her and you're going to heal her wounds because she is the child who you want to love and who you want to care for. And that moment for me was, God, like, have you ever had something go into your ear that took your breath away?
Yes.
And it changed. Like, I think I was there from the ambulance to that session was probably 10 minutes. And already I felt that maybe I should live. And we have like these common rooms or whatever.
Yeah.
And we all, get together, play games or watch TV or whatever. It got to the point we had some classes together where, raise your hand if you know the answer to da 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 or whatever, or what should you do in this situation or this situation. And I started answering naturally, people people in the crazy house started to come to me and ask me, things. They were like, the therapist said this, but what is this for real? And this lady, she came in, she's like, this is like my 4th time here. And I shouldn't be out of here. They keep putting me out of here, but I don't want to live out of here. I don't even want to live in here. They don't understand. And I sat there and I listened to it. I listened to everything she had to say. It wasn't for me to hold on to all of her secrets or all of her information. It was for me to hear them and give her that pillar to let her voice bounce from, And whatever I said to her, I can tell you right now, we're still friends. And she just got out of med school. This woman didn't even want to live when I met her. She just got out of med school. I'm so proud of that lady. But she was like, if you didn't talk to me that day, I would have been gone. I would have been back in there, or I would have been gone. It would have been nothing for me. And while I was in there, they already contacted the court because they moved my court date around so many times. They landed on a date where I was not going to be able to be released because it hadn't been the 72 hours. And they weren't going to let me out, even though they saw the improvement. They knew what I was going through. They knew why it was happening. The event of going to court is considered a trigger. And they don't want to send me into a triggered environment without at least those 72 hours. They proceeded with my court. They didn't let me do it over the phone. They proceeded to take away my rights for Adam. They proceeded to, quote unquote, continue my case for Eric, but they were proceeding to give Eric to Rob. And then giving me the chance to get him from Rob while I was in a hospital for 72 hours. Now, did that make my mental state better? No. I lost Adam, and they said that you can sign this now and save Eric, or you cannot sign it and lose them both. And for me in that moment, I think I even said it out loud. I was like, so you're asking me which child to point the trigger at? Because this foster home has been nothing but the slow and steady death of my son to die at the hands of Rob. And they proceeded. I left. I left Colorado. I had to go because in the newfound preservation of my life, my thoughts were not focusing on preserving Rob's life or Luke's life at that point, but mainly Rob's. Mainly Rob's. And I didn't want to off someone, you know, or be offed by him, because who knows what he's capable of now that he has a thing that he has been wanting from me. Rob turned himself in and went to jail for the charges that he evaded of abuse towards me. His probation violations and everything he went to jail for at the beginning of the case. And when he got out of jail, he proceeded to pursue the case and got Eric. Now, I left Colorado. I had my twins, cared for them, raised them, loved them, did my whole nine with them. Then I had my son after them. There had been periodic cases. A social worker called, their therapist called CPS on me for soda bottles once. The twins and my youngest, we'll call him Scott. Scott has autism. He's more severe. Autistic children go through an elopement stage, which means they want to run. They want to escape things. They try to open doors, unlock things. They go pretty ham. Scott did not like going outside at first. He didn't like the sight of the sun, the sensation of the grass, the warm temperature. Scott had a meltdown that was so severe that he actually broke my front tooth completely out, and kind of twisted up my nose a little bit. I had to work with Scott pretty relentlessly to get him to want to go outside. Being that this is Texas, though, and it is summer, our time outside was limited. So Scott's need to go outside after he began to enjoy it, I would take his favorite things like cars. He knew cars were outside, so he would start associating more positive things with outside. I think I had him reach that goal maybe too soon for him. Maybe I worked too hard to get it going, but it was such a point. I wasn't upset that he broke my tooth. I wasn't upset that my nose was bleeding or anything. I was so upset at looking at the pain in his face. To go to a park, a child that literally has this amount of emotion for not wanting to go to the park. I live in a place
How
where
old was he when that happened?
Scott was, that was 2018, so he was 4. I got Scott to enjoy outside within 3 weeks. It was a big feat, but we succeeded. He needed to have that moment. He was going to go to school. They were going to have recess. There was going to be times where he was going to be outside, and I didn't want him to have to suffer every time, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm in an older house, kind of like an old military base house, and the doors are inset. And so the latch on the door, the chain latch, he figured that out. He took baby knobs off. He took tools. Like, he's like Tommy Pickles. Like, once he realized outside was fun, he wanted to be out there, and it became compulsive. And so one day, Scott was asleep in the bedroom next to my bathroom. I had been wrestling with Scott almost all day. Scott finally took a nap. My other children wanted to play with me because they said, "Mom, you're always with Scott. You're never with us. You're always with Scott." And I love them the same. So I said, "Well, Scott's sleeping. Let's, play a game together or something." And Scott was right next to my bedroom. My bedroom goes in an L shape, one to my bathroom, then to the next room where Scott was sleeping. And one of his brothers wanted a drink. So we went right in the kitchen, got him a drink, I went to the bathroom. First bathroom break all day long. had to change my, sanitary stuff, girl stuff, and needed to hurry up and do that. Had been all day long needing to take care of me. Um, I peeked in through my bathroom door. Scott was asleep on the couch. Um, I flush the toilet and I hear his brother say, "Did someone open the door?" Now, all of the kids have been trained in this emergency setting from the first time he had ever done it. They know to go forward one, this side to the other, that side to the other, and meet right there in the driveway till you see my face. Go inside, sit on the rug. That's it. Mommy takes care of the rest. If you don't see him in either of your directions, mommy's already hitting the block. You know what I mean? So they were already trained and drilled in what to do because he had already done it twice before. But he only got to the front door, But it was already an issue. And so I had been trying to get my leasing office to approve me etching into the door frame to put a closing latch, one of those ones that close onto something so he can't just get a magnet and pull it out. It's got to be on the bulb part. But in order for that latch system to work, the door and the latch have to be level. They can't just be up and apart. Otherwise, it won't secure to one another, and they'll just be laying on top. But they couldn't have. They took forever. They wouldn't approve it. Well, Scott had gotten up out of his sleep and had gotten outside. Now, the older kids, they went and did their drill just as they were supposed to. I was kind of tripping over my pants trying to pull them up and run out the door. And the kitchen is right next to the front door. So when the front door opens, it hits the wall that's adjoined to the kitchen. So when that door opened, he knew it opened, he heard it open, and they went and did exactly what they needed to do in that time. The neighbor directly across the street, directly across from me, grabbed him, put him in her house. In the minute and a half, she came over. She was at the mailbox, which is on this side of the street. She gets my baby out of my driveway and takes him to her house. Calls the cops.
Who did?
My neighbor that's across the street from me.
Okay.
And my kids that went out, they said, we saw the neighbor, but the neighbor was checking the mail. This is where it gets completely effed up because the cop comes. This is after, of course, I had to recharge my phone. My phone kept dying. The battery in that phone was terrible. So I had to keep it on the charger in order to call 911, but I can't keep it on the charger and be outside looking for my kid. So the kids were in here. They were charging the phone. The 12-year-old was sitting there with the phone ready to call. Cool. The cop tells me they've had my son in the car the entire time we've been trying to find him. Now, when I first moved over here, the last neighborhood I was in, the officer told me, he said, we will make sure that we put an alert on your apartment and an eye for your children in particular because autistic children have a tendency to run away. They run away more frequently because it's more compulsive than it is anything else. Like, it's not, there's no rationality to it. It's right. A compulsive need. And he said, we will set it up so that if we see anything, if we find a little guy, we're going to bring him directly back home because we know how that is. That officer's son is autistic, and he did the same thing for quite some time. His phase was about a couple of years. So he was telling me, the things that were necessary. Mine weren't running out at that time. All of my children hated going outside, period. So there was no even going to the store with them logically. So of course I locked all my doors because the neighborhood I was in was terrible. And I had baby proofing on there. And Scott was not old enough to understand what's happening around him. Scott is extremely brilliant, but he's not verbal, and he's about the age of a 2 or 3 year old, and he's 6. But he has way more going on in there than meets the eye. So this officer who swears that his niece is autistic and his sister, he helps her all the time. He was like, you need to be thrown in prison because you were not paying attention to your son. Now, do I feel awful that he went outside? Oh, absolutely. Is it a nightmare that he was right outside my door and could not make it 2 steps out of my driveway before my neighbor came and got him? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely nightmarish. Absolutely the thing that keeps me up at night. I check that door 13 times a day now. But I asked that officer the first time my son broke out Tommy Pickle style if he could go to the leasing office and let them know the urgency of making the alterations to the door. Because I don't know if you can see behind me that little red square.
Yeah.
That is above my egress window. And I'm going to school for construction and architecture and all those other things. Egress has to maintain open. It can't be blocked, restrained in any way. And their policy is they have to be able to come in and out as they please, to do inspections, they do fire inspections every month. So they come in and out whenever. That latch being on the door that way, they have to approve it. They approve the latch part. But any integrity to the framing or I have to dig into the frame in order to make it flush with the door. It can't be protruding like this. And so I had to get this part approved. They didn't come and approve it. And so I slept in front of the door at night. He would go out the window or try to go out the window. There was things that I attempted to do to ensure him staying in here. I did 19 lock and door variations on the doors, the 2 doors. I did baby gates. I did everything possible to keep him from leaving. But because it's a compulsive, non-rational need, he was going to find his way out. His therapist stated so. Even the worker that came in when this happened stated so. When she came, she begins with why she's here, what they're investigating, and the whole 9. I tell them what's going on. Of course, I'm freaking out. I'm breaking down because I feel like I let Scott get away from me, and it could have been a lot worse than it was. But Scott made it through that. Like, nothing happened to him, thank God. As I'm freaking out and losing my mind, blaming every piece of it on myself, the social worker stops me and she says, ma'am, of every parent we've come across, of all the cases that we get called on, when your name comes up, we are amazed by you. Your therapists have nothing but amazing things to say. Everyone around you knows you to be an incredible mother. But you are human, and going to the bathroom doesn't make you neglectful. Going to the bathroom when your son is taking a nap does not make you neglectful. And to take responsibility for what you can, good. For anything you can't, don't. Because at the point you did everything you needed to do for him. And the inability, the things that were out of my reach were the things that were most necessary, was the alteration of the door. It's simple. Has he left ever since then? Absolutely not. Will he ever again? No. Because the way now that I can set up my door, I had to go into that tale to segue into this part. After that experience, I got livid on what I started looking into other parents going through this. Like, what did you do? How did you prevent it? A lot of parents are like, we can't. There's nothing out there that keeps our geniuses in the box. Like, it's once they have it in them to do it, they're going to. And you can be, if you don't have at least 5 people around that one child, you're not going to be able to do anything. Mind you, when all this happened, the CPS case was getting closed out. The social worker was closing out the case. They didn't find that I was intentionally neglectful to any of my children. An officer came and they put me in jail. 3 months after the elopement happened. They went into foster care. Scott was physically abused. They picked him up by his arms and put him in the corner because he was not verbal, so he would scream instead of talk. Nobody told Scott where he was going, where his mom was, or what's up with his family at all. So Scott would have meltdown after meltdown, and instead of that, his older brother, the twins would say the dad would slap him when he gets to hollering like that. They lifted him up by his arms and put him in corners. He used to love the arm swinging, when you take him by the arms and the feet and you use them like a swing. That's very sensory soothing for him. So he used to love it. But they lifted him up by his arms and put him in the corner, and now he can't even fathom the thought of that ever happening. With all that going on, I got livid about it because I'm like, there's got to be ways. There's got to be something. Parents kept saying over and over again, there's no devices. There's nothing we can do to help our kids. Well, my new addition to my goals in life became making home improvements that assist with autistic children, because homes aren't built for those that need it. In my researching that, there was a group of kids and parents that I could use as a demographic to help with what I need to invent, what I need to implement in these homes, in these floor plans. And in order to be a part of it, you had to go through a background check. They had to check you out, make sure you're not a creeper trying to be around some kids. Cool with that. I was very honest with the event that happened with Isaac. And even that center that worked with just autistic families, they were so upset about it. They knew, they were like, this happens to so many parents that they don't just throw them in jail like that. That part made them upset, adamantly upset. And so they did my background. They were like, everything in Texas, we talk to these workers, they love you. I'm sorry that people call social workers for soda bottles. That's kind of madness. We get it, But they said, we are concerned because you have an open case in Colorado from 2012. My twins were born in 2012, and the case with Eric was closed in 2012. What, an open? It's currently open? Yes, ma'am. It's currently open. So I call, and I call, and I call, and I call. And I get these vague answers to nothing. Vague answers to nothing. This was, I think I called, this was in 2019, it was 2018, end of 2018, because September was when I was in jail, and then December, I jumped right into this, because I felt like all of this was madness. His disability is not my felony. Changing a tampon is not a crime. If I was back here getting high with my peeps while my kids run around outside, I get that. You know what I mean? But I'm taking my first pee break of the day while my kid's taking a nap. And so I called, and this worker calls me back. She doesn't leave a voicemail. I give her both my numbers, which have remained the same, minus the home phone number now, because I don't need a home phone. I don't fax anymore. Can you go on? But I love you. You gotta go find it. I promise you will. You thirsty? Go on. Go find the cheese. Yeah, good job. And so I keep playing phone tag with this woman. Scott lost my cell phone underneath the stove for 2 days. And I put it back together. I didn't have a single voicemail from her on that phone. There was none on the home phone, nothing. I just kept getting back and forth from this woman. So I called the center back, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on with it. I can tell you it's old. I can tell you, it's not open anymore, but I can't seem to get to a person. Well, I go back again because they offered to have me come talk to another demographic of people, because as they were telling them what I wanted to do, people responded. They wanted these improvements in their home. They wanted this for their children. They wanted this. And so they reran it again. This time they said it was still there as open. And I called this time and I called 17 phone numbers from Denver to Longmont to anywhere all over the state of Colorado. I'm almost done, I promise. Go find it. You can do it. Awesome. And I called everybody because at this point I wanted an answer to my question. I wanted an answer to what this is because it was closed. Why is it still here? 20 minutes after I call one worker, I finally get down to one. I narrow down bunches down to one. She's like, oh, this was regarding Eric. Oh, what about Eric? Well, the year that I had been calling them repeatedly, Rob strangled Eric. Strangled him. Was this the first time? No.
How old?
Eric is now 13.
How old was he when that happened? 13?
I want to say 10 or 11. Eric, he was abusing Eric the entire time he had Eric. The only few times I ever talked to Eric, I bought Eric TV, PlayStation games for his birthday. I did all kinds of things. The moment that I had that window to be in Eric's life, I did everything I could. There was no pause there. Rob called me and said Eric was acting out in school. He outright, while Eric was there, was making fun of him like elementary style, like you're an idiot, and a boo-boo, you're not going to be crap. That's what he said, you know? Then he takes the items that I got for Eric, pawns them while Eric is there, in front of Eric's face, does drugs with that money. Rob has always had addiction issues, always had all these issues. They tell me they terminated my rights to Eric because they couldn't find me. That woman I have the same phone number today. If she uses the same phone number, she can call me today. But they put my name out in newspapers in Colorado Springs. They didn't call me. They tried to contact people who might have known me. These people didn't call me. These people were the monsters that caused this. I saw Eric on his birthday for the first time in 10 years. He's with one of Rob's relatives. He's not okay. He's okay because he's safe now. He's an incredible artist, and I'm glad he got that from me because we draw around here. But the inside of Eric, the real side of Eric, has a lot of questions that weren't answered. And Eric has a way of being my child. Sweetie, just give me a few more minutes, promise. Look, there you go. Woohoo! He has a way of being forward, and he was like, Mom, stop lying to me. I want to know how I got here. How was I born? Who was my dad for real? Be honest. Nobody tells me the truth anymore. They don't tell me where I'm going. They don't tell me who I'm going to be around, who I'm going to be with. They don't tell me where I'm living. They don't tell me these things. They didn't tell me you were looking for me. They didn't tell me that we tried to do anything. They didn't tell me that I didn't have to live my life that horribly with that man. Tell me everything. I want to know the whole story and why I ended up where I am. And I'm not going to, I don't lie to him. I don't lie to him. Because people lied to me when I was in care. They said, oh, these people are going to love you. You don't. You're their item. You're their check. You're their belonging. And they don't care. They don't care if you eat. They don't care if you're in pain. They don't care. And Eric could have lost his life at the hands of Rob. And that's exactly what I told them the day that they decided to involve him. Are your assignments done? Ooh, that's a good pause, isn't it? Oh, thank you, baby. So that's about it. I think that's about it. He right now, we talk now and again. I don't know if he's gonna be home. I called the ombudsman the day I found out everything. They're the ones that told me that they put my name in newspapers, and that the lady that I had been calling, they said that I left them numbers without voicemails, that they couldn't leave voicemails on. And I left them with like I was avoiding their calls. But I was in school. Like, she would call me when I'm in school. I'd leave her detailed messages. I'd call her back with my voice and say, I just missed a call from you. I'm sorry. I'm in class from this time to this time, but I would appreciate if you can call me back at blah, 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 blah. And she'd call back, not leaving a message, calling her back again. Please do not try to contact me at this time and this time and this time. If you can call me in between this window on these days, great. Thank you. Have a great day. With knowing from the last date of court for Eric, knowing from my kids have Medicaid. My son has disability in the state of Texas. There was no way that y'all couldn't find me. I'm calling you from Texas, doing a well child check on the very child that you keep saying is fine. And now I don't know.
So your case is closed?
Pretty much. They said they took my rights away. The ombudsman said that it's only been, if it's not over 2 years or something like that, because I'm not found at fault for the reason why they couldn't contact me, that they were going to look into it. I don't know what they're looking into. All I do know is that the Stevens mother is vlogging about her journeys with my sick child. I know that she also fosters other children who went in healthy, who are now not. I know that there's another woman who saw. It's crazy how this happened, but Scott loves videos about automotives and moving things. Adam is on YouTube with a motorized vehicle.
Yeah.
And Scott ended up discovering the video of Adam and watching the video of Adam, not even knowing it's Adam. And I walked into the room and I see Adam on my big screen TV. And I'm thinking, I'm having a mental something because this cannot be real. And lo, I hear the Stevens mother and the Stevens father, and I see Adam right there. And it was weird because after seeing that, like 4 days after seeing that, was a day where I posted a memory on Facebook that has Adam in it. And a woman messaged me and said, is your son with the Stevens? And I was like, yes. Was he okay when he went in? Yes. Is he okay now? No. So she abused your child too? Yes. And she's like, I'm not the only one. And she starts telling me everything that went on with her daughter. And they were forcing adoption, just forcing adoption. How her daughter would say that the Stevens mom just really wants to be YouTube famous. And just all kinds of things. And this ombudsman's supposed to be looking into whatever.
Well, did you have an attorney?
I don't. I could not possibly afford that if I tried. But I do have, well, I don't have, I'm not going to say I have. I am working towards that. I'm working towards getting that. Because statutes of limitations are not. Nobody gave Eric justice. Nobody gave Adam justice. And no, certainly nobody gave Tiny me justice.
Right.
And that's why I'm so glad to finally get this moment to say it all out loud, because
I'm so glad you told your story. There's so many people who have some similar things that needed to hear. Where, you may have already said this, where are the two children now?
Adam was adopted by the Stevens. Eric is with Rob's family. And the guy is, he's an upstanding guy. He's a football coach. He's amazing. Eric's art aspirations are very much, brought out. Like when I saw his artwork, this boy, man, get him into a school or something. He doesn't even need it. It's remarkable. And he's like, Mom, I need these Copic markers. Copic markers are expensive. But was I gonna go for it? Oh, absolutely. Because those are key to his dream. And to hear how he used to sound with Rob and how he sounds now, I don't mind if my son is chewing me out for his past, because now he's strong enough to chew me out. You know? He's not timid, he's not afraid to do it. That person is putting that in him, and it's something I would put in him. If he had made it back home, and there was all this rub about it, and he had things he needed to say, oh, please believe I would make sure he was strong enough to say it. And he is definitely strong enough to say it. Baby, I'm just almost done. This is what it is. But I love you. Why do I get the butt? He just gave me a face. But right now, that's all I can do is that the person Eric is with did say that honestly at this age, the state can do what Eric wants. Do I want Eric here? Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
But Eric is he is me. He is so me. He's like, I don't want to burden you. Pause, sweetie. You are not my burden. You are my responsibility, honey. I am supposed to do these things for you. Don't hesitate. Don't even walk around in that neighborhood, because it's not even a worry. But it's still a worry for him, and I can get that. He also is like, this man took me in for 2 years, cared for me, even when you were not around. Who am I? Who am I to then say, okay, thanks, peace out, I'm out? You know? I can understand him for that. Especially when he was saved in a moment where he felt hopeless. I can understand him for it. But do I want him here? More than anything. More than anything. If I could just run around the earth real quick and Superman this whole situation, I would have ran to Texas with Adam and Eric.
Right. Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
But it's definitely, I'm definitely glad. I scroll across, I hop on Facebook now and again. I see what you guys are doing. I see these parents getting these stories out there. CPS needs to stop being a secret. It needs to stop being a secret. If abuse of children needs to stop being a secret, if it shouldn't be a secret in the first place, why is CPS allowing the secret to happen within their own walls?
Right.
And it can't be. I used to feel so bad. I used to feel like I was less than, like with my mom, would let us just go to these places, I would just feel like, yo, you gotta be a failure as a parent to have your kid come to a place where they're beaten up every day. But sometimes it's not even you. Like, where was the state when I was screaming up and down that I was being abused? Luke might not be 100% at fault, whatever, but Luke knew what Luke was doing. Luke is still old enough to have all these kids. Luke knows how to treat people, and what he was doing was wrong. That situation, him and his mother were abusive to me mentally. Yes, but that's not, those are apples and oranges there. Mental abuse, actually, there's no band-aid. It does not heal over. There's cells actually die when you are mentally unhappy. You actually never get the same brain back. You can't just mask over that. It was so easy for them to take me out of that. I went through 3 other children, 2 other pregnancies, and 8 years minimum before, not the whole 8 years minimum part, but the 2 pregnancy parts, yes. The 8 years it took me to understand why he was mentally the way he is. I didn't even, and it sounds mean now that I'm about to say it out loud, but I didn't need to go through all that. I didn't need to learn all that about him. I needed to
Right.
leave when it was bad.
Right.
And they don't think about that. They just think about, oh, we're just going to keep exchanging these kids, stock market babies. The reason why Eric was not adopted and Adam was is because Adam is mixed and Eric is not. And it was very blatant how she said it. She was like, I'll take the mixed one, but I won't take the other. Who says that?
You got a lot of bad people around you. I don't like it.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And who says that to somebody who's not your ally? And the next attorney that I got in this case, she was just, what happened to everything Tracy already set up? Tracy had it to where we was ready. Case was about to be closed. Kids were about to be home. I walk in the court. I got Boo Boo the moron standing here talking about, I don't know much about the case, but we're going to tell mom to take 3 more years of mental health because I don't know. Don't you have to put forth effort to even go into law school, let alone pass the bar and stand in a courtroom? Who says that many ums as an attorney? You can say when you're talking to somebody, but when you're like in a courthouse as an attorney, I could have did better pro se. That's the things. That's the things that go on here.
It goes on everywhere. It's sad. It's sad.
Very. Yeah, like I said, what you guys are doing is amazing.
I appreciate it.
I wanted to start it up on my own, but I don't have the legal power. I just needed a few attorneys backing me, and then I was going to get a ball rolling. And to be honest, the way that I found you was because I was trying to start the very thing that you're doing. So I'm so glad.
I don't know if you know this, but I do a radio show too.
I didn't know that. Oh,
and there's an attorney. He did my case. And he got my kids back.
wow.
I want you to call on the radio show Saturday. You won't get this amount of time. So write a few key points that, you want him to know so that maybe he can do something about your case.
That would be really awesome.
When we're done, message the page so my assistant can give you that info.
Cool beans.
Sound good? Shannon, I thank you for sharing your story with me. I'm so sorry that all of that happened.
It makes us stronger. So thank you so much for letting me share.
It does make us stronger, but that shouldn't happen.
We shouldn't have to be strong in this way, though.
No.